the world of horology and fine watchmaking, there's something that has no substitute or replacement, and that's the history of the brand in making watches for centuries, and the commitment, dedication and devotion in what we call as masterpieces. And then when there is a story that you can relate the watch with, it becomes an even more interesting product that may possibly have simply no competition in the market. Blancpain 50 Fathoms No Red also carries with it some similar attributes and characters, where it offers a watch from the oldest watch manufacturer to exist, yet comes with a story that roots back to 60s. This was the time when Blancpain were making watches for military specifications, and one of the specs required was for the watch to have luminous infill from the material called radium. It became known later in the years that radium had health risks due to the radiations for those who became exposed to it. Blancpain were committed to offering an alternative for luminous applications, yet without the health risks, of course. And this was the drive that resulted in a watch that still had the luminous functions and met all the specifications, yet without any cost to the health of a wearer, and without emissions of any harmful radiations. This was an achievement that needed to be showcased and clearly communicated, so the message was clear, and for the same, Blancpain included on the dial the symbol with a large colored stamp having yellow circle and red segments with a black cross, and accompanied by the words "No Radiations," designed and executed to ensure that the message was understood from the text, if not from the symbol. And as much as the colorful stamp added a meaning to the design, it added to the looks, where it is almost iconic now. And if you are looking at a 50 Fathoms with yellow circle at the lower half, even from 10 meters away, you know what watch it is. This particular watch and example in the video is a revival of the original no radiation model, and is an identical watch to pay homage to the original design and the watch. Starting off with the dial, we have a matte texture to offer the vintage vibe and an experience. To offer the texture dial, when you look at up close under the macro or a loop, you can see how the dial offers surface roughness that indeed offers in return the vintage experience that the watch intends to deliver. The hour markers and the dial hands are interesting and are offered in Fortina texture to give that aged and vintage look. If you compare this watch with the original no red reference from the 60s, you would really appreciate how Blancpain have gone to match the color of the hour markers and the lume in the dial. The balance of the yellow and red colors from the colored stamp just above 6 o'clock position on one hand adds a relation of this watch to the original model, and then on the other gives it a unique and interesting character, where to some extent you can even consider this as a fun watch, especially when you combine it with some other characters that we will be looking at shortly. The date window comes with a bright white background, and similar is the case with the lacquered dial hands that add a bright and somewhat modern looks to the watch. I originally didn't quite like how the bright white date window was popping out compared to the Fortina textured hour markers, as I just thought that it might have been interesting for the date window to match the creamy color. But when you look at the original reference from the 60s, it all falls into place. So there's really no complaints that one can make. The bezel is fully luminous as well, with even the graduations glowing in the dark, and we will look at the lume shot shortly. The bezel is covered with sapphire crystal that has dome profile, and where on one hand it protects the luminous infill on the bezel that also comes with Fortina texture. On the other, the convex profile on the bezel adds an interesting character and a donut-like profile to the watch. The crystal is also domed, and the overall balance of vintage experience, yet the strength of sapphire crystal just makes this watch as something that is really hard to beat. The watch case is fully polished from upside down, and there is basically no surface that is brushed. This is interesting because where we typically see tool or diver watches with more understated looks and brush finishes, here it is all polished, which is typically a treatment you would see in dress watches. Thanks to its case size of 40.3mm, it's hard to argue that it can't be used as a dress watch. Speaking about the sizes of the watch case measured at the outer extremity of the bezel is 40.29mm, so the marketed size of 40.3mm is the correct size of the watch. To measure the dial of the watch, I measured the crystal on top and it is 28.23mm in size, and while it is smaller, it looks just very proportionate. How the watch wears on the wrist is measured from its lug-to-lug height, and here we have a watch case height of only 45.9mm, so it does not even wear tall on the wrist. The lug-to-lug width of the watch, where the strap fits, is 20mm. While Blancpain was the first watch manufacturer in the history to offer a diving watch with unidirectional bezel, the bezel action on 50 fathoms isn't quite up to the mark. I stated in my earlier review of 50 fathoms Bathi scale as well, and a similar bezel action can be seen here too, where at any position of the bezel, you can see there's a wiggle and a slight play in the bezel movement, which put simply is a poor form and execution on Blancpain's part. The bezel sound is also not quite crisp and rather very underwhelming. I will play two clips for comparison, one from the Rolex Submariner and other from this Blancpain, and I will let you gauge the difference and maybe make a guess. The second sound was from Blancpain, and you can feel how dull and almost dead the clicking sound of the bezel was. Another thing to note is that the bezel teeth are not the best I've seen. You would almost have to press the bezel inwards to be able to grip firmly. On a scale of 10, I personally think that the bezel grip here will only get 5 points, unfortunately. Under the macro, the edges of the paint are not quite up to the mark. And while this can't be spotted with a naked eye, this is not the quality of finish I've seen in watches at this price point, and there's clearly a room for improvement. The hour markers also come with slightly rough edges, but again, while this can only be spotted under the macro, this could have been better. Looking at the printing for the text, things don't look that bad until you see the first letter B, and then the way the paint splash mark has ghosted the alphabet doesn't really require any description. It in itself is a picture worth 1,000 words. The date is not perfectly centered, and this does not require a macro lens to be seen. Rather, you can check any clip of this video, and the date was unfortunately always misaligned. Putting the watch in the dark to check the diving and the no red lume functions. The lume here is truly bright, balanced and beautiful. Not just the dial is fully lumed here, but where you typically see a watch with lumed pip, here the bezel is fully lumed. This not just adds to the function, but also the beauty. I left the watch in the dark for another 5 minutes, and not only the lume was still legible, but also the loss of brightness was very consistent, so I take it as a pass. One difference in the new NORAD is the case back that this time has a sapphire crystal to showcase the amazing movement caliber 1151 that has been in the use for many years and is proven to be a workhorse movement. Despite first released in 2003, it offers over 4 days of power reserve by beating at 28,800 vibrations per hour. The movement does showcase hot horology elements, including the bridges having Cote Stitch Geneva stripes, plates with circular graining, beveled and polished edges, polished screws, and a skeletonized rotor, which has a cartouche-shaped aperture as a nod to the historical timepieces. I checked the accuracy of the movement for this piece and timed it with a digital watch. After 24 hours of observation time, the watch gained 4 seconds. On the wrist, the No-Rad wears like an absolute dream Blancpain. The case size of 40.3mm works like a charm and offers the watch case that sweet spot that many of us desire and enjoy to wear. I reviewed the 50 Fathoms Bathyscaphe, and I did state in my review that it was a relatively bigger watch, but that doesn't apply in this case. The watch here, with a lug-to-lug of under 46mm, sits in the center of my wrist. My wrist size is 6.5 inches and the wristband is 55mm, and the watch wears and fits just perfectly on my wrist, to the point that while I borrowed this watch for this review, I seem to be wanting to buy one for myself if it was available. The all-polished case offers interesting looks, and with the case thickness of 13.38mm, it does seem slightly thicker, but thanks to domed crystal, it can still slip under the cuff. The weight of the watch is also only 92 grams, and it is overall a light and a comfortable watch to wear. The rubber strap that the watch comes with is very soft and comfortable too, but the tank buckle looks very basic, and I did expect better and a little more refined buckle from Blancpain. Blancpain 50 Fathoms No-Rad showcases a watch in a 40.3mm case and offered in only limited numbers of 500 pieces that pays homage to the original model from many decades ago. While the watch is one-to-one identical design of the original model, yet it offers all the modern elements and characters. There's hour markers with Fortina texture, a lume that's although no red, yet is bright and beautiful, and then the exhibition caseback that is simply spectacular. While it is a beautiful watch, it does come with its own limitations. The date in this particular piece is slightly misaligned. The quality of the dial paint under the macro is less than impressive. And then the click sound and the bezel action are far from what you would expect from basically any watch at this price point. And then when you remember that this is a watch from not just the oldest watch manufacturer, but also the first one to offer a diving watch with a unidirectional bezel. The bezel action here really puts it all into a shame.